Hello and welcome back to video classes by Konnur English Medium School. In the last video class we were discussing M.K. Gandhi's essay called What is Moral Action, and we already understood that Gandhi is trying to help us realize something here. When we say something good, yes, a good action for example, we imagine good things that we do on a daily basis. Gandhi says even though those are good things on the surface, well, there are some things related to that good action that needs to be considered before we certify it as 100% good. So instead of using the word good, Gandhi uses the word moral, and something that is not 100% good, he uses non-moral for that. So he was talking about a king pardoning a culprit and sending a pardon order through the messenger, and the messenger's action of taking that pardon order to the prison authorities becomes a moral act only if the messenger does it with full awareness that he is doing it as his duty, he is performing it as his duty. Right? Otherwise, most of us behave like we are getting swept away like a log of wood in the river. A river that is in flood, how even big chunks of trees get swept away by the waters, the current of the water, and the chunks of wood, even though they are large enough, they cannot do anything. So are we like that? Are we like those big chunks of wood flowing along the river water? We have no control over anything, and we do not know what is happening, and we do not understand why we are being swept away like that. Well, if that is the truth, if that is how we live our life, then it doesn't matter how good our actions are, they will always be non-moral. They will always be less than good. That is the point he's bringing out here. So let's continue from where we left off. We completed some part of paragraph number 2, so now we are moving ahead with the same paragraph. So, sometimes a man defies convention and acts on his own with a view to doing absolute good. Such a great hero was Wendell Phillips. Gandhi says, well, there are some people and they have left a mark in the history because they went against the convention and acted with their own will. They did not do things because others are doing it. Instead, they asked themselves, should we actually do it? Is there any meaning in it? And is it helping anyone? So one of such people that Gandhi picks from the stories he has heard is Wendell Phillips. Wendell Phillips was an American, and he was against the system of slavery. He wanted the slavery system to go away. He wanted to abolish it. Now he was not alone. There were hundreds of thousands of such people against the system of slavery. Well, I'm sure you have heard about it when I talked about Abraham Lincoln's letter. I gave you a little bit information about Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln, when he became the 16th president of the United States of America, he had promised people that he would get rid of this system called slavery. So people who were working towards that goal, people who were working towards abolishing slavery, they were known by the name abolitionists. So Wendell Phillips was one such person. He was an abolitionist. He wanted the slavery system to go away. Well, you know, there were so many people across America, from north to south and east to west. Earlier they were all keeping slaves, yes. They all had slaves in their houses, and these slaves were usually Africans who had been brought to America on ships, forcefully actually, and they were made to work like slaves. So this system had deep roots in the United States, and there were so many people who supported that system, and a very few, even in hundreds and thousands, there were still very few in comparison to people who were supporting it. So why does Gandhi mention Wendell Phillips? That is because Wendell Phillips was not like those other people who wanted the slavery to continue. He was not like other people who accepted the convention saying, okay, everybody does it. He was not one of those people. He wanted to get rid of that system. So that is why Gandhi calls him a great hero. See, if Wendell Phillips had done nothing, if he had not worked towards abolishing the slavery, instead if he had chosen to practice and allow slavery himself, then probably he wouldn't have been called a great hero the way he is being called a great hero by Gandhi. And if Gandhi is calling somebody a great hero, then that man must have done something special. And in this case, in Wendell Phillips' case, it was just that he acted with his will. He acted with what he knew, with his full conscience. He did not go in favor of slavery. Instead, he chose to oppose it. Well, he had a great political career ahead of him, but he didn't care for that. Instead, he chose to do what was right. So, and obviously he had so many people criticizing him for that, yes? Friends turn foes, friends turn your rivals, they start criticizing you. If you are doing something that they don't want to do, if you are doing something different from them, so they might not like you. So Wendell Phillips very quickly made some enemies for himself. They were all talking against him. They were all saying bad things about him. They were all criticizing him, making wrong, untrue remarks about Wendell Phillips. But did Mr. Phillips care? Did Wendell Phillips care? Well, let's see, because most of us would be very, very hurt by things like that. When people speak bad about us, especially things that are not true, and we get to hear that often, it really hurts us, it disturbs us, it shakes our equilibrium, it takes our peace of mind away. But what did Mr. Wendell Phillips do? He talked to a group of people in one of his speeches, in one of his public addresses, about why he is opposing the slavery system, why he's one of those people who is opposing it. He said, "Till you learn to form your own opinions and express them, I do not care much what you think of me." He's saying, well, you people come to me and then say things like that. Well, you say things like that in front of others when I'm not around. Well, do you have any opinions that are your own? Or are you simply doing those things because others are doing, just like you're supporting slavery? Well, you are supporting slavery because many people are supporting. You're talking bad about me because many people are talking bad about me. So you are simply following a convention that you yourselves have invented. Well, I do not care what you say about me, because none of those opinions you have about me are your opinions. They are borrowed opinions. You have borrowed those opinions from others. So that is how Wendell Phillips spoke to them, is that I do not care, I am not hurt at all by the things that you are telling about me, because they are not your opinions. The day you come to me and tell me this is your own opinion, that whatever criticism you have leveled against me is what you honestly, sincerely believe about me, then maybe I will listen to you. Until then, I do not care. Those are the words of Wendell Phillips in one of the public addresses where he delivered. Thus, when we all care only for what our conscience says, then alone can we be regarded to have stepped onto the moral road. We shall not reach this stage as long as we do not believe and experience that belief that God within us, the God of all, is the ever-present witness to all our acts. So we will be walking along the moral road only when we follow our conscience, only when we think, only when we do things according to the conscience that is telling us. So the conscience within us, that is our God, and that is everybody's God. Everybody has conscience, that voice that tells you when you are doing something wrong, it says, no, don't do that, it's wrong. And the same voice also supports you when you are doing something good. So if you listen to that voice, consider it your God and experience it, and you will never do anything wrong. So whatever you do it according to the conscience's voice, whatever that is telling you, whatever that is advising you. And only then will you be walking along the moral path. Unless and until that happens, unless and until you start listening to your own voice, your conscience, most of the good things that you do in life may not be 100% good. They will be called non-moral actions. So that's a wonderful message right there in paragraph number 2. Now, it is not enough that an act done by us is in itself good. It should have been done with the intention to do good. That is to say, whether an act is moral or otherwise depends upon the intention of the doer. So while Gandhi, he elaborates the important point of the moral act should have been done with your will, with your full conscience, and it should have been done after you have considered all the possibilities of that action, so all the consequences of that action. Then yes, he says that is one of the shortcut ways to achieve a moral act. But he also says, not all good actions are moral actions. Even if your act is a good one, it may not be a moral action unless it has a good intention behind it. So he gives us another criteria here for evaluating our own actions. The action must be good, yes, definitely. It should have been done with our own will, with full conscience, with awareness, yes. However, the action must be done with good intention too. The intention of the doer, whoever is doing that action, the intention behind that action must be good too. That is another point brought into the discussion by Gandhi. And then again, he is going to give us an example to explain his point here. So what example do we have here? Two men may have done exactly the same thing, but the act of one may be moral and that of the other contrary. Let's say two people, person A and person B, have done an act, yes, and their acts are exactly the same. And we will also see what act Gandhi is referring here for an example. Take for instance, a man who out of great pity feeds the poor, and another who does the same, but with the motive of winning prestige or with some such a selfish end. Though the action is the same, the act of the one is moral and that of the other is non-moral. So that is how he says that the intention matters too. Let's say these two people, person A and person B, they have decided to feed the poor. Yes, there is a beggar and they see the beggar comes to them, and they have given something for the beggar. Now while one person did that out of pity, feeling sorry for the beggar, the other did that because he wants other people to see him and think of him as, oh wow, what a great man he is helping the poor. So there he wants that prestige, he wants people to recognize him as a philanthropist, as somebody who is very kind to others. So here there is that edge to that action that makes him selfish, because he wanted recognition there. He wanted people to notice and then praise him for that. While the first person who did the same thing, he did that because he felt very sorry for that poor man, for that beggar. So the action of the two people was the same. It was a good action. They both fed the beggar, but one had a selfish intention behind it. So that man's action, even though it was good, it cannot be called moral. It is non-moral. So you see, the action must be good as well as it should have a good intention behind it. The reader here ought to remember the distinction between the two words, non-moral and immoral. It may be that we do not always see good results flowing from a moral act. While thinking of morality, all that we need to see is that the act is good and is done with good intention. The result of an act is not within our control. God alone is the giver of fruit. And when we have done a good action with good intention, that's enough. You don't have to worry about what happens after that. Let us say, for example, you gave a beggar 200 rupees, thinking that those 200 rupees will help him feed himself for 2 days. Your action is good, your intention behind that action is good. But what if the beggar, instead of eating food, uses that money for something else, for chewing tobacco maybe, or buying alcohol, getting drunk? You cannot help that, you cannot stop that, but your intention was to help him, your intention was to provide him food for 2 days. So you went ahead and gave him 200 rupees. But what he did with that 200 rupees, with that money, is something you do not have control over. So things like that, they are enough. The action was good, the intention was good. That was enough to become a moral act. So consequences are always not in our hands. Because Gandhi rightly says, God alone is the giver of fruit. So whatever attempts and efforts and actions we perform, those actions may not work according according to our expectations. The results might be completely different from what we expected, because the results are not in our hands. The fruit is not in our hands. The fruit is in the hands of the God. The God alone is the giver of fruit. So thus, until now we saw that Gandhi has said an action has to be performed with will, it has to be performed with intention, it has to be performed with good intention, and we should not worry about the consequences of the action if it is good and being performed with good intention. What other things do we talk about moral act? We will see that in the next class.